Hi everyone, I am Devleena, your host, welcoming you all to another Power Pack episode of Icons Behind Brands video interview series, the CXO Spotlight. And I'm thrilled to announce our guest today, Mr. Karan Kumar, who has close to 2 decades of experience across sectors like FMCG, packaged food, stationery, luxury, and lifestyle retailing. Karan has worked across some of the most iconic brands, Indian brands like ITC Limited and FabIndia. Currently, he spearheads the marketing initiative for DLF Limited, which is India's largest publicly listed real estate enterprise. As a Chief Marketing Officer, a warm welcome to you, Karan.
Thank you, Devleena. Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.
Same here, Karan, and we are very excited to listen from you. Over 2 decades of experience in the business of advertising, marketing, brand communication. How was your journey been, Karan? Would love to know about your journey and about your background. What are the changes and challenges been so far for you?
I think it's been a very, very exciting journey. 2 decades is a long time.
Yes.
Even while I was with ITC for about 16 years, I've had the opportunity to work across 6 or 7 businesses. I've had the opportunity of working across 6 or 7 cities or locations. I've had the opportunity of working across businesses in various parts of the life cycle, some very mature businesses, some very nascent and emerging businesses, a lot of businesses in the FMCG space. So that's been one very long and exciting part of the journey. And then I moved from ITC into FabIndia as their first Chief Marketing Officer. Created the entire brand marketing function there. Lots of things to learn, lots of things to kind of implement from what I'd learned earlier, and then to unlearn and then to relearn some more. Different kind of organization altogether, promoter-led. Dealing with retail as well as with products like household furnishing, personal care, etc., etc. And thereafter now with real estate. And I've been here now for about a little over 2 years. Again, an excellent organization, very, very large footprint, good mix of being promoter-led as well as governed by a very professional board. A different industry altogether, again an industry that I hadn't worked in the past. So again, a new set of opportunities, a new set of learnings, the opportunity to actually execute some of the things that I've learned across other businesses, other categories in the past. So yeah, very, very challenging and exciting mix. So yeah, if I look back over the last 22 odd years, very, very diverse industries, very, very diverse sectors. Of course, all of them being B2C by and large,
Right.
and not B2B. For a very, very exciting journey from where I began to where I am today.
Right. And I'm sure, expressing 20 years of background and journey is not an easy task within a nutshell. So we will be having a lot of opportunity to talk about bits and parts about your experience and about your perspective onto the marketing. So moving on, you spoke about B2C and B2B marketing, right? So as DLF is into both commercial and residential side, which one is B2B and another one is B2C. So how differently do you approach in terms of the marketing strategy of both in B2B and B2C?
So let's start by saying that I am more actively involved in the B2C space because I head marketing for the corporate brand as well as the business of DLF, which is into making, constructing and selling homes, or the residential part. I do not head marketing for the commercial and the retail part. That being said, I think one is fairly aware of how the cookie crumbles, in a manner of speaking, in both these segments. Of course, in the more B2B space, you're looking at leasing out real estate to brands which have a certain financial metric to be achieved, return on space, the kind of costs that offices would typically incur, and therefore how they impact a corporate's P&L and balance sheet, etc., etc. Whereas in the residential side, where you're selling and not leasing your product, obviously it's a different mix altogether, because there, you're looking at selling to two kinds of people by and large. Broadly speaking, two kinds of people. One is a certain kind of people who move into the sector more from an investor point of view. They want to pick up something, they want to keep it for a couple of years, and then eventually they want to trade and exit the project or the property. And the other, of course, is the sector which is all about end use. So you and I buy something, maybe for some time we put it up on rent, but eventually the larger picture or the larger game plan is for us to shift into that particular accommodation ourselves. So very, very different motivations for both these buyer groups. And therefore, I think whenever you're trying to design a project and whenever you're trying to position a project, you're always trying to find meaning and relevance that is attractive to both these groups of buyers, as it were, both the investors as well as the end users. And of course, your proposition thereafter gets stitched accordingly. It's an exciting space, very exciting space. Also keep in mind the fact that from a ticket value point of view, people investing in homes, average people like you and me, or it could be even the bigger financial investors, you're putting away a very large sum of money vis-a-vis any other product class, vis-a-vis any other product category. So the level of involvement that you have with this purchase, the amount of details that you want to find out about this purchase, the amount of research that you want to do before making purchase is humongous. And I think as a successful marketing / business team, it's our responsibility to make that journey for the prospective customer as seamless as possible. Provide them with all the material that they need, be absolutely honest and transparent with regard to what we promise, deliver as per the timelines committed, and literally handhold the customer through the entire journey, making one of the most expensive purchases in his or her life as seamless and as easy as possible. So that is something that does set this industry aside from a lot of other industries.
That's right. And because of the high ticket value size, and you need to get involved a lot with the target customer and target audience, target group, your customers. And as you said, making the trust, keeping the trust, and assured your customers and handhold your customer, which become even more challenging for the marketing team. And through that, I think it is a pressure for the marketing team to come up with such creative ideas to get involved with the customers, right?
Creative ideas, yes. Creative collaterals, yes. Mm-hmm. But I think what really sets the marketing function apart here is the level of involvement and the quantity of involvement all throughout the various stages. Of a customer's journey. Mm-hmm. Right from the initial stage when a person is literally researching mm-hmm. and trying to find more information to the time when a person actually makes purchase, and most importantly even in the phase post purchase. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately a happy customer, as you would have heard this cliche many times over, a happy customer is also your biggest advocate, right?
Yes.
And if you can take care of people after they have made the purchase, after they have moved into the condominiums, after they have moved into the community, and you can take care of them and their wellness and their happiness, then I think you end up earning advocates for life. And these advocates for life in turn, refer a lot of their friends and families also to move into your brand fold. Yeah. I remember till very recently when we were in the middle of the COVID pandemic, especially the earlier phases, wave 2, which was much more deadly than wave 3. The entire apparatus we set up in a lot of our condominiums, in a lot of our communities, to ensure attention to resident comfort, resident safety. The entire apparatus of ensuring that, food from our on-campus clubhouses could be delivered to people's home when the rest of the world was shut out. Or in some cases where laundry facilities existed to ensure that your clothes were laundered and delivered to your house when the rest of the world was shut down. And thereafter, all the other things that kind of came with it, sanitizing your lobbies, sanitizing your lifts, elevators, ensuring various kinds of safety security protocols being maintained at the entrance gates, in the tower lobbies, reaching out and taking care of the elderly who are living in your community, especially if they were living by themselves and their children were, not around, were either overseas or living somewhere else. I think that is a very, very important element of what we do, whether you call it marketing or whether you call it customer engagement, because I think being invested or remaining invested with the customers who have already bought your product and ensuring that there is a continuity of engagement, I think is an extremely important part and a very unique part of this industry, which may not necessarily be for most other product categories. At the end of the day, if you've sold a packet of biscuits or a packet of chips, the customers bought, the customers consumed, and that's the end of the story. For us, the story only begins there. For us, once the customers come into our fold, it's extremely important for us to take care of them. And that's how we kind of build communities of people who turn out to be our evangelists. So, if you look at it from a marketing point of view or a customer engagement point of view, unlike a whole lot of other industries, here you need to remain invested for a much, much longer term. Your responsibilities are that much different and higher. So from that point of view, this is a very unique space.
Right. And thank you for bringing that point here, Karan, that the post selling is extremely important in a space like this, where your customers are your salespeople, your customers are your advocate. The word of mouth, which is you cannot just ignore that particular part, and at the same time the care and conviction for your customer, something which is going to take you for the long run marketing.
That's right. Yeah. So absolutely.
And Karan, like real estate as a segment, it is pretty traditional in nature usually. So, and has traditionally relied on the offline marketing space, right? For a very long time, approximately like 80 to 20 is to ratio was there into the offline and digital space. So now where the digital adoption, which has happened very rapidly in the last 2 years, so how does the new marketing media is taking place?
You see, the adoption of digital or the inclusion of digital as part of your mainstream marketing activities, and I would go a step further and say your mainstream business activity cycle, not just marketing activity cycle, has been very, very pronounced over the last couple of years. Because one part of digital in marketing is to reach your customers in the ecosystems in which they are traveling, ecosystems in which they are traversing. Ecosystems of social media, ecosystems of websites, ecosystems of any other digital interface. The other aspect of marketing also is about is trying to ensure that your customer experience and your customer journey, which hitherto was limited or was governed by the physical interaction, is now taken in an online space. Because what has happened in the last couple of years also is, outside of whatever engagement that you do on social media or other digital media, you need to also create alternatives where you can interact and engage with your customers and with your prospects in a non-physical engagement model, where you are physically distant and yet socially connected. So physically distant yet socially connected means that you will have to figure out ways on how they can explore the product while being in a remote location, how they can engage with your sales teams and partners while being in a remote location, how they can experience the product and where the sun comes in from and where the sun sets, where the wind breeze comes in from and where the wind breeze exits. All of those mechanisms you need to now figure out ways for the consumer to access digitally. So I think in our kind of business, while we have continued with a very strong and heightened presence on social media, digital media marketing, email marketing, SEO, SEM, all of that, I think there's been a lot of digital infusion in rewriting the rules of customer experience and product discovery in a non-physical or a physically distant but a socially connected kind of a manner. And I think that's been the biggest positive that has emerged out of the pandemic, because people have now been forced to look at this particular area even more carefully.
Yes, so real estate as a segment is very much, as we have discussed, like it's about touch and feel category, so it's not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Buying.
Imagine if you want to go and buy a home, right? Or your parents or your brothers, sisters, who want to buy a home. The most instinctive thing to do is to physically visit the site. And the most instinctive thing to do is to sit across a sales manager across the table, have a cup of coffee, make eye contact, shake hands, and have a serious conversation, right? Now, at the peak of the pandemic, none of that was possible. Everything was banned, movement of people was banned, curfews were in place. How would you experience all of this in a physical kind of an environment? And therefore, it becomes extremely important for brands to ensure that they can create mechanisms for someone like Devleena, who can sit at home and yet experience the entire product through a walkthrough in a real time. Can experience how the sunlight is going to move during the course of the day, or how ventilation in the apartment feels like. And I think those are all areas where certain brands were pushed to innovate. The ones who did a better job are the ones who performed better financially as well. The ones who did not do as good a job did not perform so well. But yeah, this is traditionally a sector where you want to sit across the table and have a physical engagement. And physical engagement suddenly was out of the window. So that was a huge challenge, and as is often said, every huge challenge obviously also presents a huge opportunity for you to kind of get out of your comfort zone and to do things which you've never done in the past. And that's been a very exciting phase for us.
True. And that is also true because of two big reasons. One is like the ticket size. Second is it's a lifetime involvement. For example, if I'm buying it for myself or for my parents, it's a lifetime involvement. I really need to, the sun is rising from this side or that side.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've made, during the course of the pandemic, we've made so many sales and transactions where, let's say the son or the daughter has been sitting in San Francisco. The parents have been sitting, let's say in a Vasant Vihar or in a Saket or in a South Extension. Our sales managers have been sitting out of their offices or their homes, depending on what was allowed. And yet there were certain site executives or site managers who would be at the site wearing a GoPro and having a mic and physically walking people through. So imagine 4 different sets of people operating out of 4 different locations, and yet pulling the entire story together and convincing the customer, and in some cases his or her parents, that this is exactly the right place to be and for you to put your money in.
Right. It was challenging, but at the same time, when you look back and see how innovatively brands come up with such solutions, like now if I feel it looks very magical for me, like technology, AR, VR, people can even sense it, how the things are in the sites, and there are a lot of brands, you can actually feel the product demo and all. So it was pretty magical to see the innovation and creativity which has happened in the marketing side and the business side because of the challenges which we faced in last 2 years. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how difficult or easy was it to reach out to your target audience now after the changes happened, and what are some of the strategies that have worked for the brand?
I think our ability to reach target audiences because of the pandemic has only improved, and if anything is paying off even more now in a relatively post-pandemic world, although it is too premature to call it post-pandemic just as yet. Because I think the skills, the technologies, the platforms that we've innovated and we've learned are only helping us perform better vis-a-vis the pre-pandemic or vis-a-vis the pre-pandemic times. Because now you're able to even work on, public holidays, in the sense that if a customer or a client wants to be taken through a product on a holiday when the offices are shut, you're at least equipped and you're confident enough to carry on that conversation and to carry on that engagement remotely, if that be the need. So I think if anything, what we learned the hard way during the peak of the pandemic is actually now obviously playing out and being of a certain advantage even today. Yeah. But outside of that, I think for any business and specifically for real estate, I think lead generation is an extremely important part of the entire marketing objective, right? And lead generation continues to happen through a mix of new age and traditional media. So we continue to advertise in newspapers, and newspaper advertising continues to be a very important contributor to new lead generation. And yet, we are also now more than ever before advertising and activating various digital and social platforms for communication, for information dissemination, and for lead generation. So I think that mix continues to remain in favor of the traditional media ecosystem right now. But over a period of time, and especially over the last 2 years, I think the move towards new age media, although digital and social can't be called new age anymore, they've been around for the longest time, but new age, relatively speaking, that transition has only become speedier and faster. So whereas earlier you were spending something like 10 to 15% of your budgets on new age media, today that number is up to about 25 to 30%. It's almost doubled, right? It's accelerated many fold. And don't forget that this is the number that you're spending on running campaigns. The amount that you need to spend to create your backbone or your infrastructure to sustain these campaigns and to utilize the outcomes of these campaigns in a productive manner is another kind of cost altogether. You need to invest in data mining, data storage, data processing, agencies who do that, people who do that. So if you were to look at it more from an overall aggregate point of view, I think you're investing significantly more in digital and non-traditional media, all things put together, from running campaigns to creating campaigns and creating a backend infrastructure to process information and outcomes.
Right. Very important point, Karan, to remember this. It is not just the campaign where you need to spend it. It is also in the supporting system of the campaign, like the data storage and data mining, and then finding a pattern and responding again with the strategy, right?
Also keep in mind that you need to end up supporting upskilling and reskilling of your existing your existing employees and staff members as well. When you're pushing them to use digital media more and more, or you're pushing them to use technology more and more, even as part of the sales effort, you have to spend money and upskill them so that they start becoming comfortable and confident using those technologies and using those platforms, right? So as I was giving you the example earlier, you had people who were walking you through the apartment wearing a GoPro and speaking on a mic, now you need to ensure suddenly that these people are comfortable with this kind of selling. They've not done this in the past. You've usually done WhatsApp calls with your friends and families, but you haven't done it in a professional manner where, there is a certain picture quality and there is certain audio quality, right? Likewise, your sales teams were used to sitting across the table and having a conversation with Devleena when she comes to purchase a house, right? Having a cup of coffee, shaking your hands. Now you are telling your sales teams also to do all this interaction over a screen. And they're not traditionally familiar with that, right? That's not been a part of the last 15-20 years of their professional experience. Now you're asking them also to stream video and other content through the screen. May not have been necessarily used to that. You are asking them to create content which is optimized to the internet bandwidth so that it can stream without lag. They're not trained for something like that, and therefore I think it's extremely important when you look at digital media, and especially when you look at the inclusion of technology. It's not only about the content that you're creating, it's not only about the campaigns that you're running, it's not only about the data warehouses that you have to invest in. It's also about investing in upskilling your existing employees, your existing team members, for them to become more and more comfortable in using those technology assets that you as an organization are developing. And very often the marketing team takes the lead in developing those assets.
So make them more confident about the process, about the technology, with the technology and ease. So that, see, a salesperson is like, they have to be comfortable with the conversation, and it's
absolutely
conversation. It's just like, comfort with the equipments also.
Absolutely. And look at somebody who spent 15-20 years of his life selling real estate in a certain manner, and that certain manner was always hinged around physical interaction and physical conversations. And he or she has been your star performer. He's done extremely well during his or her professional career. Now suddenly this person is given a situation that what he was comfortable with, or the way he was comfortable doing business in, that way does not exist anymore. Can you imagine the amount of insecurity it creates in that person? He or she was confident that, I will be able to crack this team or crack this deal if I was sitting actually in front of a client. And I will convince him or her, with my conversation and with my eye contact and, with having a cup of coffee together. And that's the only way he or she has learned how to do business and how to do sales. And suddenly this person is being put into an environment where saying that everything that you knew on how to sell and what has made you successful does not exist today. And you need to find a new way in rediscovering yourself and rediscovering your selling skills. The same also, by the way, holds true for your extended trade partners, channel partners, brokers in this case. Brokers were also, used to taking people physically on a show round, taking physically people to a site and explaining them the product and having conversations. Even now, with something like this happens, they don't know how to respond. At least initially in the earlier part of the pandemic, they did not know how to respond, because everything that they were skilled to do was now taken away from them, and they were asked to find a new format of engagement. So can you imagine the amount of emotional insecurity, professional insecurity that causes? And therefore, I think as responsible businesses and as responsible marketing teams, you need to create solutions for your employees and for your extended trade partners to not just pass, but thrive in the new ecosystem or the new environment. And a whole lot of time needs to be spent in understanding what can make it easier for them to adopt the new technology that you're putting in place, and to train them and to upskill them in a manner where they become confident and comfortable using those new products and technologies. I think that again is an extremely important part of the entire marketing piece, because if they don't do that and if they are not comfortable, then they will make your prospects and customers also feel uncomfortable. It is their confidence that will make the other person across the screen feel confident. Otherwise, the other person across the screen will also not feel confident when they see somebody on this side of the screen not being confident of himself or herself at all in the first place. And that could very often come in the way of not making a deal happen. So I guess as marketing, it's your responsibility to ensure that the cash flows into the account by enabling both your customers and your internal employees the best manner in which you can to close a transaction.
True. And if they are not feeling, if they don't have the conviction and are not feeling empowered, then empowerment, they cannot resonate. And
Absolutely.
people, you get a lot of vibes and aura that works. The subconscious mind takes in a different way, and all of a sudden, sitting just near the screen, a lot of things I'm actually visualizing and sensing it. Like a training process is extremely important, and a mental counseling to make them feel empowered, your team and your partners, so that, and they feel empowered, and they also make the customers feel empowered about it.
Absolutely. And therefore, I think over the last 2-3 years and over the last 20 years of my professional journey, what I've come to realize that the chief marketing officer needs to always look at himself or herself as the chief growth officer or the chief business officer. Marketing is one of the means to an end. Marketing is not an end to itself. And what is that end? The end is for your brands to get a higher degree of preference, for your brands to get adopted, for your brands to get purchased and consumed over and above other competitors that are there in the marketplace. And all of that should lead to revenue coming into the account. You have to ensure that you need to drive cash flows and you need to drive better margins. You are able to charge more by virtue of the services that you can provide, the product that you make, or the promises that you make and keep. And I think therefore marketing becomes an extremely important piece. And I've seen this evolve over 20 years, where from being only a marcom function, which is predominantly looking only at communications, now you are looking at a much broader stream of subjects, almost anything and everything that can make cash flows better and that can improve margins. So for me, that's also a very important indicator on how marketing as a function has evolved. And the various jargons, so the CMO can be called the chief growth officer, chief business officer, whatever. I'm saying each organization has its own name for it. But fundamentally at the core, as a marketing lead, you need to be leading business. You need to be impacting cash flows and you need to be positively impacting margins. If you do not impact positive cash flows and margin expansion, then pretty much as somebody who is a part of the marketing function or heads the marketing function, you have failed in your KRA.
So here we have a lot of, in our audience mix, we have a lot of people who are aspiring brand managers, students from B schools. They are watching this show. So I think this is going to help a lot, just shift the perspective, as you are the responsible for the company's growth, and this is a common goal. So think as a business perspective rather than just
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I'm saying ultimately the biggest strength of brands is to fight the battle of preference. Right?
Right.
Why do you create brands, and why do you not only work with commodities? Very often product differentiation could be very, very minimal, and product quality across many brands is going to be very similar. Yet there are certain brands which are preferred over other brands, and those brands command a certain premium. Now, if as a brand manager who's going to graduate into, let's say, a category manager or into a marketing manager, you cannot ensure that your brand remains healthy and grows in health and wins the war of consideration and preference, your brand will never be able to impact your company's cash flows positively. And if your brand is not going to impact your company's cash flows positively, then your brand is only a drain on the company's incomes, right? Whereas it needs to be the reverse. It needs to directly impact positive cash flows, and over a period of time, continuously expand the company's profit margins from what your brand can command. And therefore, brand managers need to have a slightly longer perspective in terms of what exactly is their job. Their job is not only to make a couple of ads here and there and make a couple of collaterals here and there. Their job is to ensure that their brands can continue to battle and win the battle of customer preference, thereby earning more money or more revenue for their organizations at an ever growing healthier margin. If they can deliver revenue and better margins, they're successful. Otherwise, they're pretty much irrelevant, whether it's brands or whether it's brand managers steering those brands.
Very practical perspective, Karan. Not just talking about the brand. It is about the core, which is the revenue, which has to flow to the company, and eventually you work on the brand part also. Right. So as you move forward, as we all move forward towards the future, what is the future of marketing looks like?
Future of marketing is to drive growth. Future of marketing, as has been now for a while as well, is to drive preference. Future of marketing is to continue to build stronger relationships with all your stakeholders, whether it's your end customer or whether it's your internal stakeholders as well, your employees. And the future of marketing, as is the present of marketing and as should have been the past of marketing, is to continue to build trust. Continue to build trust between the brand and its audiences. If the brand continues to do that, and if the brand can continue to drive and impact revenue and margins positively, I think the brand and the marketing behind the brand will always be future proof. If the brand cannot do that, then you will not be future proof. And if you're not future proof, then whether it is the brand or its custodian, both will cease to exist. So the answer is actually pretty simple. You need to always be ensuring that you are fighting and winning the battle of consideration and preference, which ultimately impacts organizational revenue and margins.
Right. And the core and the ground rules are always simple and basics, and that is the only tough part for brand. As you said, trust, building growth, driving growth, right? So these are the ground rules for the business to happen, but being simple is the complex thing. So it's very important to be grounded and keep the core and foundations tight for any brand growth, right?
Number one, yes, absolutely. Number two, and just to kind of build on your point, is always keep your ear as close to the ground. Always keep your hands dirty, physically being involved, grounds up, and always keep your customer and what he or she wants right at the center of every conversation. Thereafter, now if the customer moves from one ecosystem to another ecosystem, from old age media to new age media, it is your business to move with that customer there. If the customer today is into new age media, yesterday was into old age media, and day after tomorrow is going to be in ultra new age media, then you need to follow the customer there as well and figure out how to interact and how to engage with that customer across various media ecosystems. And that is where a certain degree of constant upskilling also comes in within the marketing function. All of us were not born digital savvy, but we have to learn digital and we have to understand technology, and we'll have to understand blockchain, and we'll have to understand whatever comes after blockchain to ensure that we are able to serve our customers' interests as well and as professionally competent in a competent manner as we can. So it's also about continuously upskilling yourself and following your customer everywhere he or she goes, so that you're forever hearing and learning from your customer, and you're forever being best placed to service the needs and the requirements of your customers. So trust is number one. and customer centricity is number 2.
Right, right. So with this line, I just remember one conversation I had with one of the guests. So I just got this perspective. Act like as if you are a investigating agent, like you are a James Bond, and the same way you identify your customer, you go with the customer's journey, what exactly they do early in the morning after that. So just feel in that way, become a investigating agent for them. And that
Except don't spook out your customer and invade your customer's privacy so much that the customer gets, apprehensive about you. Yeah, but yeah, the broader sentiment is all right. Yeah, I agree with that.
right, right. That's a thin line, in just not becoming over intrusive towards that.
And that's the reason, and that's the reason I raised that point, because very often brands don't realize how thin a line that is and how counterproductive it can be if you cross that line. So while what you're saying is extremely important, but it also has to be balanced and nuanced in such a manner that you don't really intrude into your customer's privacy. You value and respect that privacy, and certainly don't end up spooking your customers.
Right. So in a simple line, if I would have to say, it's like a good friend who understands the other friend very well, their moods, their choices. There are times when we know that my friend is not in a good mood to talk to me, so just I'm aware, I'm just observing, but I'm just not, poking you to respond back. So I think this is a very basic relationship of a good friendship between the brand and the consumer.
Absolutely. But a relationship of friendship which is based out of mutual respect.
If you are not a marketing professional, then who would you have been and why, Karan?
That's an interesting one. I don't know. I like design a lot, so maybe I could be somebody who would have fancied my hands on interior design, on product design, on material design. I'm also someone who likes cooking a lot, so maybe I would have pursued that passion of mine more seriously and turned it into a professional pursuit. Yeah, I think design and cooking would be the two other things that I could have probably made a headway had I not really, just moved along down the marketing line.
Right. So I could sense, like, I mean, it's more on the creative side of.
You could say so, yes. You could say so, absolutely.
So would be great if you share some of the names from the various organizations you have been associated with.
No, I think that's very simple. It's not about various learnings from various organizations or various businesses. I think the various learnings are best summarized only as one basic learning, which is what I've kind of emphasized earlier as well, which is understand your customer. Never lose sight of your customer. There can be no greater motivation for you to create product, services, packaging, communication, or any other output except what your customer and consumer wants, or you think that they want, but they're not being able to vocalize it or verbalize it, but they will really appreciate when you present that option to them. So I think across all my journeys, across all my organizations, across all the sectors and industries that I've worked in, across all these years, I think that is one universal, appreciation that I have, that always have that outside in view where you're able to absorb and assimilate what your customer wants from you, sometimes stated, sometimes unstated, rather than have an inside out view where you as a manufacturer think that you know everything that you need to know about your customer, and you actually end up sometimes patronizing your customer, which becomes extremely counterproductive. Yeah. Outside of that, every sector and every industry that I worked with has given me certain learnings. They've been, retail is very different from selling confectionery products to kids, and selling confectionery products to 50 paisa candies to kids is very different from selling 50,000 rupee blazers to young men and women. Something that I've done in Will's Lifestyle very frequently, which is very different from selling furniture to a housewife, or which is very different from selling real estate to a family, and which is very different from selling stationery products, notebooks, pens, younger students. and which is very different from selling something like Ashirwad Atta to a homemaker. So I guess every sector, every industry has come with its own set of learnings, which have been unique to that particular sector. But outside of that, I think the one uniform and universal learning has been that you need to be obsessed with your customer and what the customer seeks and desires.
The center is always the customers.
Absolutely, 100%.
Right. So, Karan, with that, we are now moving to a very interesting section, which is a rapid fire round. You need to answer in one word or one sentence, probably. So, this is an opportunity to know you as a person a little more, a little better. What is leadership for you?
Understanding problems, breaking them down into smaller problems, and then solving them one step at a time.
Who's been the greatest influence to you?
I think your family has been a greatest influence to most of us. But outside of that, I think I've been greatly influenced by the customers I've worked around, because they've often led me to understand professionally what needs to be done, and they've been a source of guiding light. But outside of that, yes, there have been international leaders as well. But if I was to take a single source of inspiration, I think personally it's been the family, and professionally it's been the customer.
Right. What is the best thing that has happened to you last year? We have just started this year, so I'm just asking about last year.
I think the time I spent seeing my daughter grow at home. She moved from being a 10-year-old into an 11-year-old. Actually, last 2 years from a 9-year-old to being an 11-year-old. So the ability to also spend some time at home while working from home and to see her grow.
Right. That's one of the opportunity we as a professional we have got to understand the family a little more better and to enjoy the perks of being at home. When are you most inspired?
When there is a challenge.
Early in the morning or late in the night?
Late at night. I'm not a very early morning riser. Late at night.
What's the best compliment you have ever received?
Is from certain people who've called me to be a coach and a mentor, besides being a professional boss.
What does creativity means to you?
Finding solutions where normally they don't exist. To be able to think laterally, to be able to draw certain patterns based out of disparate pieces of experiences that you may have in the past, and to create new solutions, to resolve solutions or to resolve problems which don't have a very simple, straightforward answer.
What is an important life lesson for someone to learn?
Integrity. I think integrity to whatever you're doing, professionally or personally. If there is no integrity in your effort or in your headspace, you will fall flat someday or the other.
True. No replacement for that at all.
No, none.
So we are out of the rapid fire round with that. And
that was wonderful.
Yes. So I also personally enjoy this section where it's just one, and it gives us an opportunity to know you as a person a little more. So before we wind up the conversation, I would love to know your message for the aspiring brand managers.
Be absolutely rooted to the ground. Be absolutely rooted to your consumer. Do not ever overcommit or overpromise. Do not commit something or promise something which you cannot deliver. Be absolutely truthful. Earn your customers' trust. And forever think how your promise or how your brand's promise can earn better revenue and margins for your organization.
Yes, and thank you for bringing such insightful points to the conversation, Karan. It was amazing interacting with you and knowing you as a person and knowing your perspective about marketing and branding, as chief marketing officer, as a marketing professional, right? So it is going to add a lot of value to the community, and there are a lot of viewers who I'm sure who are going to get a lot of value out of it. And thank you for your time from your busy schedule
My pleasure, entirely. Thoroughly loved the conversation. Thank you for asking me questions that made me answer these questions or provide these answers. This is brilliant having this conversation. Enjoyed it thoroughly myself. So
Awesome.
thank you for this opportunity, and lovely to be a part of, whatever you're doing, the show that you're putting up. It's fantastic. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Karan. Thank you, Karan. Means a lot.